recording has now started. Yeah. Oh, Cynthia's just asked if that's the pronouns that you prefer to use, and we just put it there so that we let you know what gender pronouns we prefer to use. We prefer other people to use for on us. Okay. Now, I don't know how many we are Mentimeter, menti.com. So we want to do some activities first to get people warmed up. And you can see the question popping up if you're on your phone already. And we ask the question, are you LGBTQ, straight, or prefer not to answer? And, you know, just to gauge the people in the audience right now. Yeah. So you can see that live updating of the stats, right? We have probably about 25% of folks who are straight, and that's interesting. You know, I think this is a very engaging way to see the statistics here, right? Thank you for responding. So more people are responding. I actually have a second question. Yeah. So I'm going to lock the room right now. Oh dear. I don't know where the setting is. More. Lock meeting. Okay. The moderators, you can help me if someone is locked outside and check in on them. Yeah, thank you. So I think most people have answered. We have about 3/4 LGBTQ folks, but we welcome everyone anyway, regardless of who you are and how you identify. We welcome you. The next question we have is asking about your religion, because we are interested to see where folks are coming from, and we can see responses very quickly. Wow, you are really fast in the in replying. So we have, wow, 85% of folks who are Christian. I think that should be the norm, because that's sort of our target audience. Though the 12% of folks identify with no religion, 3 of other religions, and 3% opting not to answer. Well, thank you for responding to this poll so that we can get a rough gauge of where we are. I want to first introduce I mentioned them earlier, but I also want to introduce my co-facilitator, my co-host, Pauline. Pauline, will say hi to folks.
Hello, everyone. So happy to have all of you here with us this evening. So exciting. I'm also looking forward to really hearing the experiences and the stories of the people, our panelists. Of course, I know a little bit about some of their stories, but to hear them live, sharing it, I think it will be a very special experience. And thank you for joining us. I hope this will be a meaningful experience for all of us who are here.
So we are going to kickstart the conversation with introductions and all that, and hopefully we will run to about maybe 9:30, and then from 9:30 to 10 we'll handle the question and answers, right? So Francesca, Gerald, and Peter, will you unmute yourselves and say hi to everyone?
Hello.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
That's Gerald. Francesca, are you there?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you. Very, very good. Yeah. So we want to kick off to give some background to about folks, right? The first questions that actually we actually asked some questions for our panelists already, so that it gives you some idea of who they are, what they've experienced. So why don't we start off with Peter first. When did you undergo conversion therapy? How old were you then? And how are you now? And how long were you in the program?
Okay, I participated in Choices Ministry around 1995 to 1998. This was when I was in my late teens. I'm in my mid-40s now. So I was part of that program for about 3 years.
Okay.
And I mean, I was just part of that program for 3 years, but I still continued to subscribe to their teachings for many years after that.
Okay. Gerald, how about you?
For me, I enrolled when I was 20 years old. This was in 2004. I was in national service then. And how long was the program? 1.5 years. Also choices ministry at Church of Our Savior. It was broken down to three modules. Each module spanned about 4 months with 2-month break.
Okay. So Francesca, how about you?
Yeah, I started going to Choices Ministry when I started working in 2011 until 2014. So I was about 24 years old then, and I'm in my 30s now. So yeah, interesting times.
So in a way, all three of our panelists have gone through this X-Gay ministry in different periods. One in the 90s, one in the 2000s, and one in the 2010s, right? Interestingly, 1 decade each, about covering each decade. So yeah. Pauline.
So I'm just wondering why each of you decided to go for conversion therapy, or at least with the ministry at Choices. Did you decide to go on your own? Maybe we can start with Gerald.
Yeah, for me, it was totally my choice. I came out to my pastor when I was 18 years old.
Mm.
And I was trying to sort it out with him. He totally did not know what to do. It was national service. I really tried very hard. And one of the things that I did was to do research. I came across Exodus Ministry. I went to buy some of their books. And it was there that they highly recommended that I got into a local support group. And I found out there was a Choices Ministry in Singapore. So what I did was that I actually went to my youth pastor and I told him, hey, I want to get in touch with this pastor. Can you help me, Can you make the introduction? So he went to do it. So that's how I got involved. It was totally on my own volition. No one was forcing me. In fact, I think my pastor didn't even know about this ministry. So yeah, that was how I went there. What I wanted was that I wanted to get rid of unwanted same-sex attraction. I think that was the basis of what I was doing. Same-sex attraction. I really knew what the term was because I read those books. And this was something that I thought I could do. I mean, the people at Exodus, the books that they wrote all said that change is possible. And that was the banner cry for Choices Ministry as well. So I went there believing that I could change.
I see. Thanks for sharing, Gerald. Francesca, what about you? Why did you decide to go?
Yeah. So first of all, I felt very alone in my very large church. And I actually asked my cell leader whether there was a LGBTQ ministry in church, because there were many other ministries for a bunch of different, various groups. So yeah, but there wasn't. And she couldn't connect me to anybody, even though it was a very, very large church. So I felt very alone. And during my birthday that year, in 2011, I think I wasn't very well. So I had a manic episode. So I just wanted to go to a random gay club and make out with some stranger, which I thought wasn't very healthy. But I think there's nothing wrong with it actually now. But the thing is, yeah, I think at that time it wasn't very healthy. And also, so I got, instead of doing that, to go to a random gay club, I went to ask 5 of my closest friends in church to buy me a Cy Rogers DVD. So Cy Rogers is a member of Exodus International, which Gerald mentioned. He set up Choices Ministry in 1989 or something, I think, for 20 years before it shut down. So after watching the Cy Rogers DVD, he said that, you need to find support, and not just any old support. You need to find someone experienced in same-sex attraction. So yeah, so I Googled and Choices popped up. So I went I actually just wanted to meet people in a support group, but we had to go for counseling first. So I completed the number of requisite counseling sessions, and I joined a support group, and I met people who are just like me, which I was grateful for. So yeah, I actually wasn't aware that it was conversion therapy per se. It was only much later that I realized when Exodus was closing down that the facilitator told me that it was, what I went through was reparative therapy. So that was when the light dawned on me and the scales fell off my eyes. Yeah, so yeah.
I see. So would you say there's a difference between reparative therapy and conversion therapy? Because there's all these terms coming up, right? And and sometimes people are not really sure what they cover.
I think if you depending on who you ask, there will be different opinions. But true conversion therapy to the hardcore, it's like electroshock therapy and all that. But reparative therapy is a subset of that. So it has elements of it, but it's slightly different. So it depends on the definitions. But I would say that it can be quite damaging and harmful to vulnerable groups. So and like Gerald said, that definitely Exodus did say that change is possible, even though later they admitted that when they closed down Alan Chambers. I was there when he closed down the organization. He said like most of the almost 100% of people he had encountered as president of Exodus in the many years he was there, they didn't turn straight. Yeah, so that's why they shut it down basically.
Thanks for sharing, Francesca.
Thank you.
And then we have Peter. Peter, why did you go for conversion therapy?
Yeah, when I was when it was my late teens, when I was in the army, I struggled with depression. So I started seeing a counselor, and I think the counselor was really well intentioned and she was really trying to help me. So she said, maybe if I refer you to this ministry to deal with same-sex attractions, that might help you. So I was referred to Choices Ministry. I had a one-on-one session with Cy Rogers, and I felt convicted. This is something that my parents will never approve of, and this is something that might lead me to wholeness or might lead me to emotional wellness. And so that's why I volunteered for it.
I see. Thanks, Peter. Nyak.
So one of the things that we did ask is that what were the effects of the program on you? And so Peter, I heard your story before, so yeah. Would you like to share that with the rest of the people tonight?
Yeah, sure. I attended Choices sessions in my late teens when I was in army. After I had a stay out posting, so I could attend in the evenings. And after that, I went to school in the US for university. And even after that, I continued to subscribe to Choices teachings. And I looked for counselors in the US. This is where reparative and conversion therapy originated from. So I actually went to some very famous people for counseling. I went to this guy called Bill Consiglio. He was the founder of Hope Ministries, who specialized in reparative therapy. And I went for, attended 12-step groups. I went for deliverance ministry to cut soul ties. I read books, on dysfunction. I read Nicolosi. I read Elizabeth Moberly. I attended conferences by leading advocates. At that time, it was Leanne Payne and Mariel Bergner. Those are very old names. I don't know whether their ministries are still around. And I also sought out groups of other men who are also seeking reparative therapy and recovery, from homosexuality. And I originally thought that my journey would just be at the most a couple of years. And these men, they had been journeying for even longer than me. What I had originally thought was just going to be a few years, they had actually consumed them for 10 or 20 years. And at the end of this whole long process, I did everything that I was asked to do. I did my level best. I did what I was told, But even after checking off all the boxes, I realized I still had same-sex attractions, and I still had all the religious shame associated with it. It wasn't that I just tried for a few months. No, I actually stuck it out for about 10 years of my life, which is a long time. And when I look back upon it, actually, this kind of therapy, it can be subject to a lot of abuses, because it's a bit like selling snake oil, because it's something that, you know, the participants really want, but it's kind of like cancer doctors, you know, they can actually bottle hope for you and say, you know, this is going to cure you of your cancer, but in the end it doesn't, or it might not, you know. So it's subject to abuses. And what it did for me, this program, so I did try a lot of things. I was part of a Dragon Boat team for many years. I tried deliberately to bond with other guys, you know. I kind of pursued overly masculine activities, and I think I was kind of shamed into neglecting my feminine side. I even tried to date a woman for a few years, but the love and attractions weren't really there. And ultimately, I decided not to pursue heterosexual marriage, because I think upholding my integrity and not jeopardizing the lives of others, and the lives and happiness of other people around me, was more important to me.
Was there positive effects going through this?
Yeah, sure. There was, because so what happened was that I had encounters with God. Okay, when I was part of Choices Ministry, when I was part of church, I had encounters with God. You know, and over the years, I've, you know, by encounters, I mean, you know, I guess I see things, I started speaking in tongues, you know, received the baptism of the Holy Spirit, you know, and over the years, I have developed a deep relationship with God, because I've also taken certain steps during the course of my life to cultivate this relationship with God. You know, I went for Bible school. So this was what Choices actually opened up to me, but at the same time, I'm not really convinced that I needed to suffer so much to get to this endpoint. I also started to see through a lot of bullshit. So I didn't become straight in my sexual orientation, but I became straight in my thinking. You know, I started to see through a lot of legalism, a lot of hypocrisy, a lot of deception in the church, a lot of excuses that thrive in the Christian world. You know, a lot of selfish agenda, a lot of pride of opinion. It's really a journey. It's really a journey. It's not just a journey for us, you know, in learning to accept ourselves. It's also a journey for straight cisgender Christians to learn how to accept us. I find that they shouldn't pretend to have all the answers, because they really don't. You know, they don't. They seriously don't. Humility and understanding are what's called for. The type of listening that's there to understand rather than to reply. And in my experience, only those Christians who have suffered the loss of a loved one, who experience same-sex attractions themselves, or who maybe have gay children or grandchildren, those are the ones who are emotionally vested enough to embark on this journey.
Thank you. Francesca, how about you? What were the effects of going through the program for you?
Okay. Do you want to hear the positive effects first or the negative effects?
Up to you. Maybe the positive first.
Yeah. So the good news. I think the good news was it was really a place where I got to meet like-minded people, friends, because then, and more so now, I found that it was very hard to meet gay people, or gay Christians to be specific. But I think now, right, like with this recent controversies, it seems to me, and when I interact with certain groups of friends, I think it's difficult because both sides don't understand each other. I think the secular queer community sometimes is very hostile to Christians. Not because they want to. I think Christians have been very judgmental. So when I was in Choices, I really found a very tight group of friends, and we were really sharing very vulnerable stuff that none of us ever share with our cell groups or in our churches. No matter how I spent a decade, right, in my first church, and I never talked about any of these because like there was no occasion to, and nobody would understand, or even if they did, it would be different. Like it's just different. So I think I really found my core group of friends, and I think that if there's anything worse than conversion therapy is isolation. I think during the circuit breaker, when people were isolated, you know, imagine like if you, yeah, so it's just really, really hard. So that was the good thing. Like I really made very good friends that understood me. And then the bad thing was because I made such good friends, content warning. Yeah, so I'll talk about my friend who died. So one of my friends that I made in support group, she took her own life, but not only because of this. It was like a gay version of 13 Reasons Why, right? So many reasons. Parents, her pet died. But I think what really struck me was during when I realized one of the reasons, I realized that it was probably during the conversion therapy that the mindset of heterosexuality was reinforced. So she was dating a guy who was gay, but it was out of her whole life, it was the only guy she liked. So they realized that it was not a fantastic idea. They consulted people in the ministry and they said, it's not a good idea. And and they consulted people in mixed orientation marriages. So it didn't work out. But I think what really hurt me was during the funeral, when the letter was read out by her sister, the phrase that I cannot be normal, really hurt me, I guess, because I realized that was what she thought, that she could never be normal. And shortly after that, just before her death, I think it was Christmas that year, I had a pastor in my second church who preached a very homophobic Christmas sermon. And then, so her death was like 4 days later. And then I couldn't, so I had to quit church. If not, I couldn't. I think I just felt like her, very worthless. And I think it's very difficult. Because I think what it was that, it just reinforced the mentality that, that you're not good. So even though Raphael might have said that, heterosexuality is not the goal, holiness is, I don't think I think that's actually really harmful. So that was the negative effects, and I'm still recovering from her death, her suicide. I'm still seeing a therapist every week right now, and processing it. So so that's the story.
I want to take a pause here because I want to thank both Francesca and Peter for sharing so vulnerably. It's not easy. I think that this is a story that they are carrying in their hearts and continue to wrestle with. Francesca, I can hear in your voice the pain still, and a pain that I think is not necessary to be inflicted on anyone. I want to thank you, all three of you actually, for having the courage and the vulnerability to share with us, because we don't get this kind of opportunity, because it requires someone to revisit pain, to revisit their experiences, and to be so vulnerable when the rest of us are just, tuning in and listening. Really want to honor that for the three of you. And I want to take a deep breath because I've always said that, there are a lot of people we have lost along the way. And we carry that, and we carry them with us. Gerald, how about you? What are the effects of the program on you?
So to understand the effects, I think I'll do a little bit of what the other two speakers had done, which was to talk about what already went on in choices. I think Peter mentioned cutting soul ties. When he said that, I'm like, oh wow, I haven't heard that phrase in a long time. Cutting soul ties. And the theory behind conversion or reparative therapy, or what have you not, is that there's going to be a dominant mother in your life, overbearing mother, and a very negligent or abusive father. And I had a combination. I had a very screwed up childhood, emotionally traumatic childhood, quarreling almost every other day. And so when I was introduced to the choices doctrines, I embraced it like, oh God, it's like exactly why I became gay. It totally makes sense. So I went through that phase, cutting soul ties, where you had to pray, and then you cut the soul ties of the sins of your forefathers, your parents' sins, and that caused your homosexuality, and that was what's taught to me. There was the deliverance part, of course, And there was a very huge comparison to your sexual desires, your unwanted same-sex attraction with drug addiction. So the mantra that kept being repeated was, it's like a drug addict, you feel like taking drugs, but you stop yourself from doing that. Thinking of taking drugs is not a sin of itself, but taking drugs is. So the analogy was used on us. I bought into it. As a 20-year-old, I really believed it and I embraced it. So my journey, like Peter's, I went all out. I did everything they told me to do. I diligently went to every session. I was in close, I did beyond that actually. As I mentioned earlier, I came out to my pastor at 18 years old. So I was also accountable to him. And one of the things that he did was to make me accountable to three other friends of mine. So I followed that to the teeth. And of course, the standard Christian doctrine is you don't even entertain those thoughts. So no jerking off, right? So every time you wank, it's a reset to day zero. And during that period of choices and accountability to my pastor, there was a 14-month period. I didn't even, continuous period, I did not wank at all. That was my record for that. I think I hit almost 5 years without any sexual contact with anyone. And that's where during that process, on hindsight now, it became very clear that it was very unnatural. You feel like you're bottling up something and it tears you apart. And for me, I was kind of open to some of my church friends and pastor for accountability, but there was still that barrier between me and them. They could not understand me. And I think that was the negative effect that happened, right? Because I try to deny yourself, you try to suppress that part. That's one of the aspects. Another aspect I felt was that I became homophobic. I remember I was in social sciences in university, and there were, of course, discussions on homosexuality. I remember quarreling with this lesbian girl very harshly. And looking back, it's just so natural that if you are trying to suppress this within yourself, you are externalizing the battle. And I think there's no surprise that the most homophobic people out there are really hidden, closeted gays. I was like that. So I can understand that perspective. So that caused me to be a very militant homophobic person, ironically. I think on hindsight, it's quite a waste of time, to be honest. Let's face it. So many years trying. I had my first date only when my whole church was torn apart. I just couldn't be bothered going to church anymore. Couldn't be bothered being accountable. I just dived into the clubbing, into the hooking up. It was like a kettle. The lid just blew off, and I just went crazy. And during that period, I didn't even get my theology fixed yet. I wasn't thinking about it. I just wanted to do everything that I could not, I did not allow myself to do for 5 years. So at 24 years old, I went to my first club. I went on my first date, and I felt that those years were wasted. And I spent many years trying to reconcile the lost years, right? 18 to 24, those were really formative years. I didn't even date a single person except for a girl that I tried to date. And I think that was a very big effect. It's something that I can't get back ever, right? I can try to make up for it, but those are lost times. I'm fortunate enough to think through all my positions. I'm the type of person who I don't just follow blindly, but some of my group mates, they are less of that kind of personality, so they just took in whatever was taught to them. And even after we left choices, a lot of them continued for years trying to fix it. And last I heard, one was very suicidal, and the other got into trouble with the law for a sex-related offense. My view is he was just suppressed too much, right? That he had to have a release. And it's very destructive in that sense. When Myung asked me to think about what positive things came out of it, I told him this. I told him, and I will tell you guys this, I don't think there's any positive thing. It's like saying how being raped, right? The positive thing of being raped is that you come out more resilient. It's not positive. It's the silver lining. So the silver lining behind this is that I'm totally resolute now having tried so hard on that path, to know that this path just doesn't work. And in fact, during my last year struggling, I actually challenged some of my church leaders. Just find me one person who has successfully crossed over, has changed. Just one. I'm not asking for much. Just one. Just one. Because I read all those ex-gay books from Exodus, all of them talk about their continuing struggle. I didn't even find one that would change. And in my mind, if God didn't make us this way, if God intended for us to overcome this, if this was a sin of sorts, there would be full rehabilitation. Where is the rehabilitation? Zero, none. Even Alan Chambers, who married the last president of Exodus, he also admitted it. And so I think that yeah, those are the negative effects and yeah, the silver lining. That I was resolute to know that this just doesn't work.
There's a question that popped up that I also would like to ask. What does cutting soul tie do? What is it that about?
Oh, it's like, so at the first few weeks of choices, I think Peter would agree, he maybe the same experience. They gave us this list where we had to list down all the things our family had gone through, right? Even diseases like heart disease, high blood pressure, and things like idolatry, adultery, homosexuality, all that. So you take whatever you can, and then you have to cut soul ties in the sense that these are the sins of your grandfathers, your grandparents, and your parents. You cut it in the name of Jesus, that kind of thing lah. And basically, that on hindsight, that was the stage that set up the entire theory that you are like that because of the sins of your fathers and your forefathers, and it's not your fault. Blame your parents. And I think you would, if you have watched the
Boy Erased.
what is that? What
Boy
is that
Erased.
movie?
Boy Erased.
Boy Erased.
Yes, Boy Erased, right? When I watched it, I'm like, dang, this is exactly my experience in choices. Yeah, so it's putting the blame on your parents. Boy Erased, the guy was lucky because he had really good parents, so he couldn't link it. For me, it was a perfect match. Or so it seemed, right? Like, it seemed like the theory worked for me. But on hindsight, when I started making gay friends, I remember asking them very offensive questions like, don't you have problems with your father? Don't you have problems with your mother? And I remember this guy, we were walking in one big group, and then he was like, no, I do not have problems with my parents. Can you stop this line of thinking? Not all gay people are like that, okay? And then I over time, I realized there were more gay people from normal families. And the theory just didn't work anymore. So, yeah.
Okay, I would like to just share my thoughts on it lah, because I went through deliverance, you know, I had to deal with some stuff, and part of it was helpful, okay? Part of it was helpful. I think in addition to what Gerald has mentioned about generational soul ties, let's say if you were raped by somebody, or let's say if you had been sexually abused by somebody for a continuous period of time, maybe in your childhood, right? You might have soul ties with that person. And these soul ties, if untreated, they could lead to depression, they could lead to suicidal tendencies, blah, 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 okay? So I think that there is some truth to it, all right? There is some truth to deliverance, which I think is helpful, but it's also it's part of the solution, but not all of it. And when you administer deliverance, but you don't administer love, you won't bear fruit lah. It won't. In fact, it will bear bad fruit. Okay. I always feel that truth spoken in love bears good fruit. Truth not spoken in love doesn't bear fruit, or worse, it bears bad fruit. All right. So this is what I feel about it. But this is a deliverance ministry term, and they will ask you to go through this checklist to kind of declare whether you've been involved with the occult, involved with have any sexual abuse, blah blah blah. And some of this, don't rule out God, because he works in mysterious ways. So some of it might actually be helpful, but not all of it.
I think that some of it might be helpful, but the danger is when some of it is helpful, everyone, some people might think that everything is good, right? What's more dangerous than truth is half truth. Yeah. And that's the problem, I think. Peter, what we were talking about, Gerald's talked about some people who went through a program had some negative experience. What about you? Do you have any experiences of any other people who have gone through the program, and what happened to them? Because we don't hear about that.
Yeah. Okay. Because I think just looking at the history of conversion therapy, I think in the 60s and 70s they did electroshock, right? So thankfully, by the 90s, they didn't do electroshock on us. Okay, thank God for that. However, if they teach theology or they teach teaching that is not grounded in love, it can bear bad fruit. All right, it can bear bad fruit. And to me, the way in which I received the teaching was that, I felt a lot of guilt and shame whenever I was attracted to men. And it's very insidious because I tried to bury these feelings, but they were insidious. They were continuing to fester and eat away at me. And when I was in my early 20s, I struggled. I had alcohol addiction and sexual addiction, and bulimia and all these things. As like Gerald's case, very similar. Okay, these were formative years of my life. Okay, these were the years in which I should have been exploring the world, trying out new things. Understanding people, other people who are different from me. I didn't spend it using that. In fact, I had this misguided teachings. And I felt I wasted these years feeling very ashamed, feeling worthless at the core, feeling not authentic, feeling double-minded because I want to do this, but at the same time I'm taught this, and definitely not fearfully and wonderfully made. Yeah, it caused me tremendous stress and repression during that period of my life. And I actually had a nervous breakdown during that time. So I was in the mental, after the end of sophomore year, I was in the mental hospital for three months.
I just want to thank all of you for sharing. I mean, I think some of the things they've been sharing this evening about the effects on you, what you've been through, and some of it for long years, actually. And the things that, like what Francesca shared about her friend, I think that's really vulnerable. And I just really want to thank you for allowing us a glimpse into your journey and allowing us to kind of experience that with you just for a little bit. Before I move to the next question, I just wondered if you all had any other things to say about the effects that you observed in others around you who went through the program. Anything that you wanted to add on to, whether it's from Gerald, Francesca, or Peter.
Yeah, maybe I can just add on to what I've been sharing. So, I mean,
Sure.
there was a group of us around the same age or maybe slightly older than me who went through choices at the same time. So my assessment of the program is that it doesn't bear good fruit because these peers are no longer attending church today. All right. From what I hear, most of them have chosen side A. Now, what is side A? Side A is a more affirming approach towards gay relationships. And so after 10 years of doing this, I realized I'm getting nowhere, right? So I kind of abandoned this teaching. So I kind of embraced the dark side, and I didn't really want to associate with those who would dissuade me. So, I was in I spent a few years in the XX gay closet. In the XX gay closet, all right? So after that, I lost touch with these people. I've not been able to reconnect with them. And my sense is that they don't want to be contacted. It's too painful.
So it feels like the effect actually carries on probably for a long time in all of your lives in some way. Francesca, Gerald, do you have anything else to add on this?
I think for me, in our group, I mean, it's quite small group. It's only three gay girls. So one died, one left the church, and there's me. And I think I am in a process of exploring spirituality. So because I think the concrete Christian faith that I had so solid, so firm in the first 10 years, first 13 years actually, first 10 years in the first church and 3 years in the second, just completely collapsed after my friend died. Because I think what kept resounding in my head was like, how can we be fearfully and wonderfully made, to repeat what Peter said? I felt, honestly, I felt like I was fearfully and wonderfully made. And if God made me gay, how can I be fearfully and wonderfully made, right? So I was so conflicted. So it kept ringing in my head. But I guess now it's clear, I am who I am. It's fine, So if and something my first pastor once said, if some people can be very sincere, but they can be sincerely wrong, they can be sincerely wrong about so many things. And I think if people are hurt, it's clear that things are wrong. So if my friend died, it's clear that, I mean, apart from the fact that she had very severe depression, but I think it was a contributing factor. So I think if she was the only one in her church that knew that she was gay, nobody else knew in the funeral, I couldn't say why I was there. How I knew her was from choice. I couldn't say anything because I wasn't supposed to review how I knew her, and it was supposed to be that way. At where we meet people outside, we are supposed to say, "Oh, we know each other from a seminar." We can't say the truth, and I do not like not telling the truth, right? So yeah, during the funeral, no one knew, and how can it be that in the church she grew up in from a child until she was 30 plus, nobody knew she was gay? I was so upset. So yeah, anyway, yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I think for since everyone else was sharing about numbers, maybe I'll just throw in the numbers for my batch of choices. 6 of us. As I shared, one got into trouble with the law because of sexual related offenses. The other had severe mental issues. The remaining 4 of us, I think 2 of them are still attending church very regularly. They are kind of leaders, but they have fully embraced gay relationships. They're both in their own gay relationships. The other one I've lost touch, but last I heard he was dating a friend of mine without reservation, and me, I'm happily attached for about 3 years. So I think my batch had it's pretty decent outcome. But as you can see, no one in the mode of success has defined by choices. I just want to share something else, a negativity, which is that I think we've all looked at the negative effects on us directly. But what we don't see is the negative effect it has on the community directly vis-a-vis the straight people around. Straight people, I grew up with many straight friends in church. I can tell you that a lot of them, especially the strong Christian, the conservative Christian ones, they would see outlets like Church Choices and True Love Is as approvals of what they think is the right theology. So they will use that as the basis to say, but people can change, well, why can't you? You're just you just don't want to listen to God. You're not a Bible believing Christian. So that becomes ammunition to be used against the gay community. And I think that is a very, very big negative thing. For me, it didn't affect me so much because I at one period of time, I just had it with church. So they couldn't use this on me. My friends tried to use this on me actually, but it just didn't affect me. But I can imagine for a gay person to embrace his sexuality, and he has very close straight church friends, that may be used against him. So over the years, I've actually met, ironically, outside the bars, a friend will introduce me to a Christian gay guy who is struggling with this issue. And honestly, my answer is this: I'm sorry, I can't even begin to understand how you're trapped. I mean, I understand how you're trapped in that. You have to choose between, so to speak, the love of your best friends and your sexuality. To me, I was just overcome with anger because my church just split apart because of very stupid politics. The youth pastor was fighting with the senior pastor. So to me, I was fueled by anger. So anger helped me to really leave the church at the time. So I was lucky. So I know that there are a lot of people out there, and some of you out there may be in a situation, and all I can say is I feel like I'm out of the matrix now. And sometimes being out of the matrix could actually be harder because you don't have that safe environment of the church, but living your authentic life, being true to yourself, and finding peace in yourself, the way God created you. I think that's more important than holding on to friendship at all costs. Yeah, so that's a little thing for me.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Gerald. I think you really kind of brought out that point, and it's such an important point even today, right? The tremendous pressure that sometimes such programs can have on those who are struggling, on those who are trying to make sense of all of this, and hearing that, if other people could do it, why can't you? And that is such a hit, not just on our, I think, personhood, but also on our relationship with God and who God made us to be. So thank you for sharing that. So now that all of you kind of have had your experiences, and I know like programs like Exodus, have shut down, but do you think that other similar programs should be shut down? I mean, what's your view on that? Maybe you start with Peter then.
Yeah, I think that these programs should either be shut down, or they should be accompanied by lengthy disclaimers. they should become accompanied by lengthy disclaimers as to what actually victory is or what actually healing is. Because people get the wrong idea. They believe that you are healed if you can change your attractions from gay to straight. But that's not how I see it, and that's not my experience, and that's not the experience of those around me.
And Francesca, what do you think?
So I am of mixed feelings. So the thing is, I feel, okay, it's going to be a long answer. So
Sure.
get yourself in. So the thing is, right, if you go to the True Love Is website, it says that it exists as a resource and support for Christians with same-sex attractions, right? So if that is the case, right, they shouldn't publish all over social media and then ask themselves why they're being attacked or silenced, right? Because it's clear that, as in to me, it's clear that if they want to target Christians, they should do a church tour. But that being said, right, yeah, like what Peter said, it all the videos, if you examine that, so I was a diligent Singaporean student. I went to look at every single video, right? So it's always stories of overcoming. It doesn't show like what we are saying now, like the three of us, right? The stories that I guess failed. So, and also like my friend died, she can't share her story. So the thing is, I think that, yeah, like they should come in with a disclaimer, you know, that not everybody has the same outcome. And even though it's true, they say that they might still have same-sex attractions and some of them are married, but they don't act on it. It doesn't mean that it gives people the false impression that, you know, your orientation can change when it can't, even though they're not explicitly saying that. So yeah, so that's the first point. But that being said, I realized that if these programs don't exist, I wouldn't have come to Free Community Church and made a bunch of great friends like you have, Pauline and Yang and many others, right? So it was only when I was in Choices, someone said, I don't really believe in all of this. Why don't we check out an alternative? So we went to FCC, but we didn't really agree. The theology couldn't agree with our system, like not matched, right? So I couldn't, I mean, it's a bit different now, but yeah, at that time I couldn't. So I just start with my old church. But I think that if you look at the demographics, right, like if the queer community is largely hostile to Christians, and if the Christian church is hostile to gay Christians, where are they supposed to go? So I feel like, I mean, of course, FCC is a great place. Like, and I would encourage people to continue in the next couple of Fridays to attend the Old Testament and New Testament and LGBTQ conversations. But I think that, like, in the meantime, in the interim, like, if these places don't exist, people can't meet. At least for me, it was really a place, I wasn't there to be converted to become straight. So I guess my story is a bit different from the two guys, but I really went there to meet people, and I felt so alone. And I did. It helped me meet people, and I was grateful. So yeah, it really, so the support group really supported me at that time, even though it had a tragic outcome. Yeah, so I am of mixed feelings whether it should be shut down. So I think, of course, if FCC could scale at a large scale, that would be great. Yeah, so that's my point of view.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing, Francesca. Gerald, do you have a view about this?
Yeah, I think it should be shut down. As a matter of a moral imperative, it should be shut down. But the question is, if this question is posed to the regulator, should the government shut it down? Then it's a different story, right?
Right.
The government should, I mean, to me, this is the same question as, should cigarettes be stop being consumed? My answer would be yes, because the science is clear. Smoking makes you a less healthy person. Same thing. Should such program be shut down? It's yes, because the science and all the anecdotal stories, because this is a very tricky issue. It's very difficult to collate statistics, really. But all the anecdotal stories seem to point in the direction that it's all snake oil, to borrow Peter's phrase. It's all snake oil. It doesn't work. So sure, by all means, you can try, but it's going to fail, just as it has for every single person who has gone through such programs. And since True Love Is has been mentioned, Mel, if I may, yes, they did say this. They opened this to say that, you know, it's just a resource center. But think about it logically. Let's think about it logically. You're going to go to your pastor and say that, okay, I'm out. You know, I read the True Love Is stories. I'm inspired. Now what? Think about what the pastor's going to do. The pastor's going to refer to programs, resources. They're all going to point to the same reparative therapy resources. And I remember, I don't know about now because I stopped stalking True Love Is website because it just makes me angry at the deception and the misrepresentations. But I remember when I first checked it out, it had references to two particular people who were very instrumental with Exodus ministry. Those two were Joseph Nicolaisi, which Peter mentioned. The other one was, help me in this, Anne Pock, is it? The lesbian wife of the gay guy?
John Pock, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Anne Pock's resource. And Anne Pock, later she and her husband both admitted, after the husband was caught trying to pick up some boy at a gay club secretly, they admitted that this just didn't work. So again, their resources, the basis behind True Love is the same thing. They're just trying to make it feel nice. And I really think, I think this program should be shut down. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that you brought up their resources, right? And how the resources were actually people who used to be in Exodus. Because at least as much as I've spoken to True Love is people, they would say very clearly that, they don't think orientation can be changed per se, but they're trying to encourage a holy life, right? And to that end, I think for a lot of people, they may be choosing to be celibate, for example, perhaps not, thinking that their orientation can change. But it's interesting now that, you talked about their resources, because I think the resources are also very telling about where then, is the direction towards, what they're hoping people are able to go towards, even if on the surface, maybe, what is being communicated is not always very clear, at least not in the general way. So yeah, so thanks for sharing that.
One of the interesting things that, Gerald has segued into our next question and asking the panelists, what do they feel about TLI? And I have to repeat, what they are sharing is their perspective, and Pauline and I will be sharing our perspective as well. But these perspectives do not represent FCC. I must clarify that first, because we haven't made this official stand kind of thing. The interesting thing is that the founders of Safe Haven and people who were involved in FCC in the early years, right? Many of them actually went through choices. Right? This is part of our DNA in some ways, and choices actually help them work through. And like Gerald, right? To a point where this is not working for me, but like it found like-minded people, and it helped them make sense of who they were. Or who they are. And I think that's something that we need to put in perspective. But Gerald has talked about how he felt about TLI. What about you, Peter? What do you think about True Love is? Is it like reparative therapy or conversion therapy?
Yeah, I think that they actually present a very incomplete picture, because True Love is actually fails to include 5 different stories that I've identified. Number one, they fail to include stories of LGBT people who have been rejected by the church and they no longer attend church today. Number two, they fail to include stories of LGBT people who have committed suicide, for example, like Francesca's friend. And many of these stories go untold. Number three, they fail to include stories of people who have been serving in church, but after they come out to the pastor, they are told to step down from ministry. All right? Number four, they fail to include redacted testimonies of LGBT people who pursue straight marriages, but after a while they realize this is not who I'm created to be. They subsequently divorce, and marriages and lives are destroyed. And number five, they fail to include stories of people who harm themselves, or they cause themselves self-harm because of what they're taught in conversion therapy. And I also agree with you, Pastor Miak, that the testimonies at True Love is they perpetuate negative stereotypes. For example, one particular story is about this guy who had sex with 3 or 4 men per night. That's actually not homosexuality, that's sexual addiction. And because the majority of straight Christians in the Christian world have never made the effort to befriend or cultivate relationships with LGBT, they have the mistaken notion that all LGBT are like that. So I think it's very damaging in that sense. I feel that God sees us as beautifully and wonderfully made, but True Love sees us as intrinsically broken. Our sexual orientation is an intrinsic part of us. When True Love conveys the message that our same-sex attractions are unwanted, what they're really saying is that they wish someday we will cease to exist and strangers that they can love will move in behind our faces. It's a very extreme point of view, but it points to the reality that people engage with the life they have and they don't want to be cured or eliminated or changed. They want to be whoever it is that they've come to be. And this is part of integrity.
Francesca, how about you? What do you think about TLI?
Oh, I have too many thoughts. Where should I begin? So I had this really long conversation after cell group one night with one of my cell members. So I can't replicate it, but here are some of my thoughts. So whether I think it's conversion therapy, so I cannot confirm nor deny the fact that I do not know because I didn't go for their support group sessions nor their counseling sessions which they advertise. The first resource out of the like 10, the first one is with the true love is people, so I didn't go for it, so I can't confirm or deny it. So I don't know, but if they use the same materials that all three of us have, then yeah, it's a kind of reparative therapy, so which is a subset of conversion therapy. But I mean, if you just look at the website and it is just the stories they are sharing, it's just their stories, right? It's their testimonies. So that's the experience they've been through. And how I feel about it, I think that I feel like they are very true and heartfelt testimonies. I know two of them personally, like the two individuals, and yeah, I believe them. The thing is, I feel like, unlike what Gerald said about, I feel outright conversion therapy should be banned, but I don't think that what is presented is necessarily conversion therapy, like the videos themselves, right? So there is a distinction I would like to draw between the counseling and support group and like the videos. The videos to me are just their testimonies. And they might have gone through the same stuff as we did, but it's not therapy per se. Therapy is a process where, you speak to someone or you have a group session. So the thing is, I feel like it's a prerogative of the individual, right? So if they want to make an informed decision, they should let True Love Is website, come to our FCC sessions, or like read books of Joseph Nicolosi and read books of Side A and Side B theology, which is where Side A is where God affirms same-sex relationships, and Side B is that, God doesn't, but it's okay to be gay, just be celibate or like go into a mixed orientation marriage. So I think that people should make an informed decision, and even if conversion therapy should be banned, it's people's prerogative if they want to be gay and celibate, right? Like, if you look at history, or if you look at Wesley Hill's book on spiritual friendship, there are people who are gay and celibate, and that's fine. But it shouldn't be done out of compulsion. It should be done out of, like, I read a gay Catholic blogger. It's because of you want to be obedient, right? Obedience is his choice. It's not because he was forced. Whereas a lot of us, we were forced into this, right? We are forced to be straight, or we are forced to not suppress our gay side. So I think that's very harmful, right? Because suppression just leads to, an explosion in the end. But I think if people want a certain sort of life, they should try it and probably realize it doesn't work after a while. But I think that, yeah, so that's like a fraction of my many thoughts. I'll just end there on True Love Is, yeah.
Gerald, do you have anything to add? Because you did mention about TLI just now.
Yeah. So I think it's again, I did mention that it kind of like justifies our identity as for us who embrace our sexuality. It kind of justifies the attack on us. I want to share a story. Basically, when my anger with the church subsided and I started to attend church again, one of my old I was a church leader and one of my fellow leaders told me this. He said that, why don't you come back to God and leave your lifestyle? And I actually turned to him and I scolded him. I actually said, you know what I went through, all these years of pain. I tell you, it doesn't work at all. And I've tried so hard. I don't think I know anyone else who has tried harder than me. And I've already told you, just name me one person who has succeeded. And then we can have the conversation. If not, don't ever talk to me about this again. I was so angry. Yeah, but we're still friends to this day. So, but that just illustrates the big danger of True Love Is, right? It underscores it. It's used as a weapon. It's used as a tool to say that embracing the the gay agenda is wrong. That's why it's terrible. Yeah, I think to me that's the big issue, and that's why I get so upset when I see friends. Still see my good Christian, my old friends sharing some true love is stuff lately, and yeah, I'm just very annoyed because to me they're just selling things that they don't fully understand. Yeah.
Peter, how about you? What do you think? Anything to add?
I've said my piece already. Regarding cannabis. Yeah.
And then, so what do you want to say to people who are thinking of going through conversion therapy, Peter?
Yeah, I feel that, you know, it has to be your own decision, born out of love and acceptance for yourself. You know, the Bible tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves. Now, if we've never learned to love ourselves, there's no way we can love our neighbor. You know, as RuPaul says, if you don't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else? And secondly, you know, when parents, in the old days, when parents still send their children to choices or reparative therapy, it's not due to love, but it's due to intolerance or ignorance. But that's a classic case of the ends justifying the means. But God's ends require God's means, without which those ends will never be achieved.
Francesca, what about you? What do you think? What do you want to say to people thinking of going to conversion therapy?
Yeah, I'd like to say, so first of all, talk to people who have been through it, like us. And you know, it's your prerogative, right? So if you want to, try it out. But you know, also try out FCC support group. I heard from someone called Miak that we are coming out with some support group, right? So that sounds cool. So you know, think carefully about the theology because I think, like, you know, you gotta pass through the passages related to homosexuality. And, you know, if you want, you know, go to the 316 church, but also come to FCC, you know. I'm such a good ambassador. But I think really, I mean, ultimately, right, it's the material used in reparative therapy, right? It's not even scientifically based. It's not even theologically based, you know. You can go and read books. It's all out there. It's just a set of values, right, that a bunch of people in the 80s came up with, like, you know what Gerald said about the dominant mother and the absentee father, you know, they came out in the 80s and they persisted. Now, it's not theological, it's not scientific. So if there was a dominant mother and a distant father narrative, wouldn't that make a lot of more people gay, right? How come, you know, yeah, so a lot of gay people, Christians, you know, come from perfectly whole and happy households. And I mean, also straight people have been abused, right? So the theology, not theology, the teachings are suspect, right? So I would say also, you know, watch the movie and read the book based called Boy Erased. It's quite an accurate descriptor and memoir. I read the book and watched the movie. It's very good. And also, you know, Alan Chambers, he was the ex-president of Exodus International that shut down. You can read his memoir and why he chose to shut it down, or go to YouTube to, you know, watch a video. Justin Lee interviewed him, and yeah, in the video, which is about an hour long, he said basically he shut it down because it wasn't working. You know, that conversion therapy doesn't work. That's why he shut it down, and he felt responsible. And now he's on an apology tour worldwide because Exodus is a worldwide ministry. And yeah, so he's just apologizing to all the people he has harmed and families broken. And also, you know, read the testimonies and memoirs of ex-gay survivors who shared their stories on YouTube. But I think for people who want to pursue a celibate lifestyle, you know, there's also the spiritual friendship community, which I was very fervently reading for a long time. So there are gay Christian bloggers, some Catholic bloggers. So, you know, it's your prerogative, but I would say that you should make an informed decision and not just be forced into something you don't want to, right? So it should come out of your own choice. Yeah, that's what I like to say.
Francesca, you also said, you know, I mean, during our conversations, right, that you actually attended the last Exodus conference. You flew all the way to the US to attend it. What was your experience there like?
So I think we weren't expecting Ellen Chambers to shut down Exodus. We were all very excited. Oh, you know, like it was my first gay Christian conference, but it was also my last ex. Yeah, so on the first night during the keynote, so you know Christian conferences, there are keynotes and then there are workshops, right? So that night during the keynote, he said they were shutting down, so you could hear a pin drop. Everybody was stunned. So then the reporters, the next day there were a lot of reports. So he just, during the whole speech, instead of preaching a sermon, he just explained in detail why he was shutting down. So I mean, the details I can't remember. It was many years ago. I think it was 6-7 years ago. But basically, yeah. So he said, I mean, the only phrase that stood out to me was, you can't put lipstick on a pig and make it any less of a pig. So basically, the analogy was that you cannot beautify Exodus and say that, you know, that it's helping people when it really isn't helping people. But I feel like during that event, like when I went to Choices, I met so many people who were gay and Christian, and I felt so supported. And I went for the youth workshops, and we shared stories. So it was very comfortable. Like, you know, when you meet people who are like you, it's just different. And it was such a big setting, so international, but like we all connected. And then I chatted with my roommate. So she is straight, but her husband is gay. So they're in a mixed orientation marriage. And now they're still married, have a baby in, I believe, Washington. And yeah, so she was Asian, I guess that's why she was paired with me, because everybody else was white. But anyway, yeah, I think it's their prerogative. So the husband really wanted to have a marriage, and it was their joint decision, and she was informed, not like people who were like, I guess, tricked into marriage and then they had divorces in the end. But yeah, it was a good experience at the last Exodus conference, and then it was just shut down for good. And yeah.
So now that you have told us what you want to say to people who are thinking of going for conversion or reparative therapy, what would you want to say to the people who are conducting reparative therapy even today in the various forms? So shall we start, Peter?
Sure, yeah. Well, first of all, why do I call myself gay? Because I have unconditional acceptance, a sense of belonging, deep friendships, and a deep sense of community with these people. So to the people who are conducting conversion therapy, if you want to engage with LGBT, but you cannot even allow them the right to call themselves gay, and instead you label them as same-sex attracted, so you don't even allow these people to have the right to self-definition or self-determination, then it's impossible to engage in a civil conversation, I feel. Apparently, being LGBT in the Christian world means you have a sex life and everyone is entitled to know about it. Allow me to make something clear. I cannot be reduced to a sex act. My sexual orientation is a part of my identity, but it is not my entire identity. You are not allowed to fantasize about my sex life or lack thereof. Stop talking about me like a theory and talk to me as I am. I am Peter. It always feels to me that salvation is only available to LGBT people with many strings attached. But I wonder, where along the way has it become so complicated? Because Jesus never made it so complicated. It was meant to be so simple. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so.
Thanks, Peter. Gerald, what would you want to say to people conducting therapy like this?
Well, I think that first, you shouldn't, because it causes a lot of destruction. It causes a lot of pain. It wastes a lot of resources and people's time. And you wouldn't want to promote something that has zero track record, right? There's an easier way to achieve what has been achieved, which is simply just be celibate. Just have the message. Be very clear. If you want, be celibate. If this is your belief system, be celibate. Don't ever get into a relationship. That's your aim. But don't come with all those notions that change is possible. It's very difficult, but change is possible. it's very misrepresenting. And just don't. And I think to the earlier question about what I wanted to say to people who are thinking of attending conversion therapy is don't attend as well for the same reasons. And what my co-panelists has been sharing, there are so many other people who have walked that journey. Why do you want to waste years when you can just waste a month? Waste a month, read their books. Read their books, watch the videos, okay? You just waste a month. Come to the same realization. I took years. I didn't have the benefit of Exodus closing down. I really respected Ella Chambers when I was identified as ex-gay. I read all his books, and I wish that Alan Chambers had come out earlier. I would have believed him, because he is one man who is very honest to himself at a theological level. He's very honest when he writes his books. So yeah, so just my answer to both questions: don't.
Thanks, Gerald. And Francesca.
Yes, okay, so I would like to address something Eliza is posting and also what I want to say. So I'll say what I want to say first and address that, because it's actually what I wanted to say, but I never had the chance to. So, okay, so what I want to say first is listen to our stories, people from True Love Is, etc. You know, sit down and have a conversation with those you have harmed and reflect on why you're actually being silenced. And also, I would like to say that different people have different callings. If that's their calling, you know, that's yours. Have you considered that that's just yours? It's not what ours, clearly. And you know, like Paul the Apostle said it's better to be single, but he forced everyone to be single. No, right? He just gave a suggestion. Okay, secondly, right, what Eliza is talking about is sexual fluidity. If you read Lisa Diamond's book, so it's Professor Lisa Diamond, she wrote a book about sexual fluidity, which I read. Basically, to summarize it, it says that she did a study on a bunch of women, quite a good sample size, and said that, you know, she realized over a 10-year period, many people experience sexual fluidity, mostly women, actually all women. So some women identify as lesbian or gay, and then they were bisexual at the end of it, or straight, and vice versa. Some were straight, and then yes. So I would say that, yeah, I mean, sexual fluidity is a thing, probably more common in women, both women and, okay, yeah, sure, women and men. But the thing is, I think what we're saying here is that it's the book, right? It wasn't conducted on people who had conversion or reparative therapy. It was organic. So it's fine. I mean, if you look at the broader queer community, sexual fluidity is accepted. It's just that when it's pushed by Christians, it's not. But the point I want to make, right, is that if it's forced upon you, if conversion therapy is forced upon you, and if you look at the track record, like Gerald said, it doesn't work. Conversion therapy doesn't work. But if it's organic, sometimes, you know, sexual fluidity happens, but mostly it doesn't. And especially if it's forced upon you, it's very harmful, right? So it's a thing. It's just that, yeah, I think it can be an organic process, but generally orientation, it's your own personal journey, and it shouldn't be affected by people who want you to change for their own benefit, for their own comfort. I feel like that's a lot of the time the case in churches, even though True Love says that, you know, church is becoming a safer place. I don't think so. First of all, it's not becoming a safer place. And secondly, yeah, it's fair. It's not good. So you should listen to, yeah, make an informed decision, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Do any of you have anything else to add about what you might want to say to other people who are thinking of undergoing reparative therapy, or people who are conducting it? Anything else to add before we move on?
Yeah, I guess I can talk about some of the couples, the mixed orientation couples that I know, because I joined a cell group in Church of Our Savior, and I was very close to, I'm still very close to a couple of some couples in mixed orientation marriages, and sadly, I don't think those marriages are doing that great, you know. And so there's two couples in particular that I worked closely with. So neither had children, neither couple had children. They had differences lah. They had differences in their marriage, and I didn't see the marriage as particularly, you know, I didn't see them having like a ministry that impacted a lot of people. I didn't see that. I felt that they struggled. A lot of the times they struggled in silence. And that's why I have to say there's actually a lack of data, because you don't know whether people are telling the truth. People can say they're happy, but are they really happy? Who knows, right? You know, and people can say that they're happy now, but what about 5 years or 10 years down the road? You don't know that for a fact.
Well, for me, I want to take people at face value. You know, if they say they're happy, I'll take it at face value. I trust what you say. But we also need to understand what you're driving at, Peter, because sometimes there's a lot, not sometimes, often in church, there's a lot of putting up appearances, right? Putting up appearances and not being authentic about who we are. Those are the questions that we actually put to the panelists, and I see that there are a few questions, many questions that really been entered into the menti.com that we'll go through. But Pauline and I want to wrap up this part and offer our perspectives. And one of the things that you know, we want to say is about what we feel about that. I don't think that I want to silence anybody. I think that we want people to be able to speak their own truths, right? But also they need to realize that their truths are their truths, and my truth is my truth. It might be their calling in life to be celibate, and that's God's call for them. But that may not be the call for me or anybody else. And that's something that's something that we need to be very clear about, right? But there's also the core of it, I think, is the damage that's being done when you're told an integral part of you is unwanted, undesirable, or bad, right? It causes you to hate yourself. And that self-hate, that self-loathing, that part of you that they say that God does not love, right? Yet this part of you remains there. And you continue to hate that part of you, and it becomes very harmful. This self-hate leads to people to harm themselves physically and even take their own lives. I think this is the problem, right? When we make people hate a part of themselves, right? Especially when they keep repeating the love the sinner, hate the sin. It doesn't make sense, and that is the harm. And whenever people say, you know, people have unwanted same-sex attraction, who said that it was? Whoever gave them the idea that it's unwanted in the first place? It's like a circular thing, right? The very source of it is actually church, and then you go back and you're returning to a place where it's being reinforced in some way, and that's what I'm very concerned about. Yeah, Pauline, you have perspectives on it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for sharing, Yak. So Meg and I have been talking, but just last week, I had a closed-door conversation with Pastor Norman from True Love Is and a number of other individuals from different groups. One of the things that I actually managed to be able to share with him, and I'm very thankful for his openness to listen, is actually this. You know, True Love Is in their collaterals and their websites, materials say that they exist to provide stories and resources for Christians who want to know more about LGBTQ issues, right? But really, the stories that have been curated, at least so far, are for people, and they themselves admit it, and some of them even say, I don't identify as gay or lesbian, I just identify as someone who's struggling with unwanted same-sex attractions, right? And so one of the things that I said to him was that, you know, it can feel a little bit like misrepresentation of the LGBTQ community, because you see other people in your videos, a lot of them, at least most of them, would say, I'm struggling with unwanted same-sex attraction. I don't even identify maybe as gay, right? And so the stories are of a subset of people, and their stories are real, and we honor their stories because it's sacred, right? Each of our lives, each of our stories are sacred. So we're not going to like silence anyone or say that no, your stories are that we are rejecting or canceling your stories. Definitely not. You know, I know some of them and their stories, and I've actually sat down for lunch with them. So I know, you know, that they're real. But to say that this represents and helps Christians or the church understand more about the LGBTQ community and issues, I think it's a little bit of a stretch, right? And that's a bit problematic. And that's also what's causing a lot of discomfort and unhappiness, right? At how some of these things are being put across. So that's one thing that I did want to say. The second thing I actually wanted to say was that um, unfortunately, people who do reparative therapy do not realize that many years down the road, those who are struggling, many of them actually come to FCC. So I'm a counselor, I'm a certified counselor, but I have seen cases of people, and I continue to see them, of people who have been struggling because they went through reparative therapy 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And you see, it's not just about the physical effects, you know, like the people who do end up committing suicide or those who self-harm. That's horrible, you know, but just the continuing effects of people who have learned, like what Miak said earlier, learn to reject a part of themselves, learn to hate a part of themselves, and find it so hard to crawl back into that whole belief that God actually truly loves them just as they are, you know. And I've seen their struggle because I journey with them, I walk with them, you know, and I know that they want to believe, but because of all of the beliefs that they have had to kind of inculcate within themselves, they're actually coming up against a lot of that resistance, right? So, yeah, so we actually see the effects of reparative therapy in a very direct way. Okay. The third thing I wanted to say is actually, when I think about it from my own experience, 20 years ago, you know, I grew up a Christian, right, in the mainstream church. 20 years ago, when I realized I was struggling with that with the fact that I might be lesbian, I shared it with some close Christian friends, and you know what? Even 20 years ago, they were okay that my orientation might be gay. They were okay as long as I was struggling against it. As long as I'm able to say, this is unwanted and I'm struggling. And you know what? Actually, nothing has really changed after 20 years because this is actually what the situation is today. So, you know, I don't think that the church in general has always said that you have to change your orientation. I think there have been many quarters of the church that have accepted that you can't change your orientation, but they want to see you struggle and resist it to some extent, you know. And so that's kind of what I wanted to share.
And I mean, to add on to what Pauline is saying, the part about hating yourself, right? And also realizing that God does, you know, and thinking that God doesn't love this part of you, leads a lot of folks to think that they are not deserving of love, not deserving of love from anyone. And so they end up substituting sex for love, and which leads to all this sexual addiction and behaviors. And that's the problematic cycle that begins when someone is you know, suppressing, and then, you know, when they no longer can realize that they can no longer suppress or they can change, then they flip the other way, and it leads to a lot of issues. I think that's the one of the keys. And what's the problem is that they have a big, huge platform, and these stories become these stories sort of representing the LGBTQ. We don't have the platform into churches. We don't get to have the pulpit or sharing or what. So a lot of Christians, the only time that they see LGBTQ people, and even though these people come out and say, we don't identify as LGBTQ, we consider ourselves Christians struggling with same-sex attraction, that's what people see. And it perpetuates those stereotypes of LGBT folks, and Christians and even parents of LGBTQ folks consume these stories without and their narratives without any alternative. So and it perpetuates all these misconceptions, and that's a a problem, I think. Yeah. So enough of that. I want to go into look at some of the questions that you have put up. And yeah, I'm trying to look at the questions. How can LGBTQ and allies respond to ex-gay programs being rolled out in their home churches? I think that I think that confronting the leaders and sitting down and talk with the leaders is important, right? When they are trying to roll out these, I think that's to have a conversation. Yeah, I don't know if any of you have other opinions. How can we, LGBTQ, A+, and allies respond to these programs being rolled out in their own home churches? I don't think it's rolled out in their home churches. It's probably promoted or referred to.
No, it's rolled out. Some churches roll it out.
Roll it out.
Yeah. I know friends from Choices who had churches. The pastors, they were consulting Choices on how to do a same thing in their church. So, yeah.
So what program would they use?
I think Choices Ministries materials law. I'm not sure. I didn't ask for the details because it was the guys group. So the guys and girls were separated. So I don't know the details. But I think if I were to answer that, right, I would say that, show the pastors that true love is not the only option. There's also FEC, and the ex-gay theology is really very suspect. There is not very clear theology, I feel. So I think they need to have a more balanced approach, and share the stories, not just of one side, both sides, and that people have been harmed by it. So yeah.
Peter, you want to chime in?
Yeah, there's actually a saying, which is there's 3 types of people who are very hard to correct. Okay, this is a sweeping generalization, right? So the 3 types of people who are very hard to correct are doctors, teachers, and pastors.
Pastors.
So when you want to propose something to a pastor, okay, and tell them, they are wrong or you should be doing something else, you have to do it with great fear and trembling. You have got to be seeking God, and you have to be in prayer. You got to, ask God for discernment, ask God for wisdom, ask God for love, that you are speaking the truth in love. And this is the attitude I feel that we can do as allies, to all or LGBT to speak to our pastors about this. It is with great fear and trembling, and we should be praying about it. We should be asking God for guidance about it.
Francesca actually shared something before.
Yeah.
Whenever you invite someone like Christopher Yuan, you need to share the video of
Linda Robertson. Yeah.
Linda Robinson.
Can I talk about it? Yeah.
Please talk about it.
Yeah, okay. So my first church that I left, it was a large mega church. So they invited Christopher Yuan. So Christopher Yuan is this Asian American guy. He is ex-gay, basically. So he's now the poster boy of in America, because he was a short story. Basically, he was studying to be a dentist, but then he was in a gay lifestyle, and he took drugs, and he went to prison. But he got reformed in prison, and then now is studying to be a pastor. And he contracted HIV, but now he's healthy. But the thing is, a lot of churches invite Christopher Yuan as a success story, right? So it's a success story because he's celibate, and he is very dedicated to being celibate, and he goes around with his mom sharing the story. But his is a success story. They don't hear about Linda Robertson. Basically, when I was at Exodus, the last conference, one of the workshops was when actually keynotes. One of the keynotes was when Linda Robertson and her husband, they were on stage sharing about their son who died. So basically, the son went to conversion therapy because the parents are very devout Christians, and the son came out to them very hesitantly, and then he was kind of like Gerald. He went all out in conversion therapy, but at the end he couldn't take it, and he broke, and then he ran away from his house. And then at that time, Linda Robertson was like crying, and she was saying, all I wanted was my son. I don't care if he's gay or straight. I just wanted my son back because he ran away from home. Then they found him. He called back, and then they found him. He went back home, but he got addicted to drugs. And then one day he had an overdose, because I think all that years of suppression, and he really tried so hard. And then he had an overdose, and then he died. And then so she said, I was so sorry that I kind of forced himself into this corner, because now I don't care if my son, I don't care if I have a gay son, I just want a son who's alive. And then everywhere she goes sharing the story, she cries. And then all of us cry in the auditorium. And like, yeah, it's on YouTube also. It's very, very sad. So yeah, it's quite tragic. Because the parents who enroll their children, they don't know the harm they're causing until it's too late, right? So that was the case for her. And you usually people just want to see the happy stories. They don't want to see the tragic and devastating stories. And so many years on, it was like many years on, and she was still every time she shares her testimony, she cries. And it was just so sad. Yeah.
We have another question. How can we help a friend struggling to reconcile sexuality and faith?
I have an answer on this. Yeah, okay, I'm going to quote from someone in the audience. I'm going to quote from the supremely gifted and articulate Davian Orr. So I presume that this question is asked by a straight person, yeah? Because it looks like it, yeah? Okay. Well, a big part of the problem that straight Christians fail to understand is that the debate isn't merely a dialogue between two equals sharing different opinions on a controversial issue. It's one person sharing something deeply painful and personal, whose views cannot harm your life the same way yours could harm and has harmed theirs. If they open up their heart to you and share their stories, you would merely be telling them why you think they are wrong about their stories. It is not an equal exchange. It will also be a betrayal of their trust. This isn't to say that you merely accept what they say without argument, but rather that it might not be the appropriate time or place to do so. So I think the best advice is actually to listen to understand rather than listen to reply.
You took the words from my mouth, Peter. I think that to help someone struggling to reconcile sexuality and faith is to listen to them and not be judgmental and not come with any presumptions or any answers, and listen to them. Listen to them. I think listening is an act of love. Real listening to understand, not listening to rebut or argue. And I think that's the important part of the journey, and showing that you're accepting, right, and supportive, and not like you must do this or you have you are trying to skew the outcome in a certain way. I think that's an important thing, and especially the part about doing harm, right? We are talking about our own lives, and it's it's something that's very personal. And I think that's need to be lifted up as well.
I just wanted to add on a little bit, which is actually kind of what you both have said. But I think often when people come and ask me, how to reconcile their sexuality and faith, I think the first thing I do is that I don't make assumptions. I don't make assumptions that I understand their definition of what it means to reconcile sexuality and faith. Of course, I have my own opinions. I have had a very long journey trying to figure that part out for myself, but I don't assume that how they understand reconciling sexuality and faith is the same. So somebody may decide that their best path that they can take is that they want to be celibate and they believe that that's the obedient path for them, and I want to understand, and like Nyak said, as well as what Peter said, is really about listening to understand, listening so that we can journey alongside and facilitate that journey and help that clarity come up for the person, rather than kind of imposing any point of view per se.
Let me see the other questions that we have. What change does FCC hope to see in the short term and long term regarding the issue of conversion therapy? What can be realistically achieved within the next few years, and how can we get there? I hope that there's some way of getting a warning label on it. Just like what they do with cigarettes, right? Just now, Gerald was saying that it's just like smoking, right? Smoking harms, so there's laws around it. But people can still make the choice. And I think that it is important to tell people that this can be harmful. Reparative therapy has been shown evidently that it can harm people. and anyone going for it needs to have this warning and not be what's the word, and not going into it and not knowing what it is. Like what Francesca said, right? When she went into conversion therapy, she didn't know it was conversion therapy. I think that's an important thing. Yeah. I'm going through the questions. What made you guys remain in church and not seek answers with other religions? One of the things I would say is that that's an assumption that all of them are identified as Christian. But I'll direct the question first to Francesca, then later to Peter. Yeah.
So I think I left the church after my friend died because I couldn't stay in it. I mean, like, it was super homophobic, even after I chatted with the senior pastor. So I think for a year I was a bit driftless. I wanted to join 316 Church, but when I went there, it was closed. So I didn't, and I came, no, literally, like, I went there that Sunday. I think it was probably like an off day or something. So it was closed. I went to FCC and it's open. Yay. So, but I think my faith kind of really collapsed last year. So I think I sought out Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Unitarian Universalism, a bunch of, and counting. So I think that there are parallels in that and Christianity, but I think that God ultimately cannot be put in a box. So that's my current state. And I would say that I'm spiritual, and certain Christian verses still resonate in my head, and songs still sticking there after many years. So like, but I think like yes, I think that being fearfully and wonderfully made and being loved by a divine being, by God, however you might define them, is it's a great stuff. But I feel like for me, I really found comfort in people. And if in God, in the Bible, you know, there's something called the Imago Dei, right? If it's the image of God. And I find that in people. I find that when I make friends in FCC, even in my previous churches, the ones that I was closest to and I was out to, they accepted me for who I am, and we are still friends today. I think that was the most precious. So I find God in people, and that we are images of Christ, and yeah. So I'm thankful for my, and so I go to FCC because of my friends. And I debate theology with people, with my, and I like to question my pastors. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to share that you know, I still identify as Christian because I'm deeply in love with Jesus Christ. You know, I'm not preaching a pro-gay gospel, I'm preaching the gospel, okay? Because Jesus is the only one who can cause a true awakening. And even our church life is not the kingdom of God, because our churches at best are just gatherings of people who are looking for the coming of the kingdom of God. So I'm part of the kingdom of God, very much a part of it, and church is maybe one aspect of me living this out, not the entire aspect, but definitely, you know, going to church is part of practicing my faith. So it comes down, I mean, basically my answer is that, you know, I have a deep relationship with God, so that's why I go to church.
Gerald, how about you?
Well, I'm no longer attending church. But you know, interestingly, Miang, when you put out the question at the start, what do you identify as? I still click Christian. Yeah, I think I haven't settled my theology, to be honest. I have been like desical about it. Like I just put it to the corner. To me, I think it was, honestly, for me, it was not a sexuality thing, right? As I explained, my church got split out by politics. 1 or 2 years later, I tried to attend another church, but I didn't want to restart the friendships again. So to me, I just decided not to attend. And I made better use of my time on Sundays, in my view. I tried to attend FGC a few times, but again, I felt that I didn't want to restart the getting to know people in church, that kind of thing. I mean, you guys are great people, and I attend your, every time I'll attend your services. But I just don't want to delve too deep. Maybe for me, it's I just don't want to be so invested and having to lose my church family again. I think the pain of that is quite terrible. So to me, it's not really a sexuality thing. Yeah. But that said, if you're going to ask me how I'm going to reconcile sexuality with faith, I don't see my sexuality as stopping myself from believing in God, believing in the Bible, because, well, if you look through carefully, if you think through the issues carefully, you will realize that this tirade against homosexuality is very similar to the tirade against freeing the slaves, against interracial marriages. The church has, for centuries, been on the wrong side of morality, and we only realize it later. So I honestly think that I mentioned it in the chat earlier, but I think the two movies that help me find faith, help me find peace between between Christianity and my sexuality, it really is Prayers for Bobby and Boy Erased. Yeah. So I really strongly recommend that you watch them, because the characters in those movies, based on true stories, actually went through the entire process of reconciling their faith with their sexuality. Yeah.
Thank you for all your answers. I see that we're coming to 10. I was scrolling through some of the questions, right? One of the top questions is what's currently known about the cultures of different churches. The truth is, we don't know, or at least I don't.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. We don't know because we don't spy on other people, or we don't take resources to investigate other people. Yeah. So.
I think Milk muted everyone except for me.
No, I just unmuted. No, the moderators unmuted me. Okay, so we don't. At least I don't know about their approaches or stances towards conversion therapy. I would say probably a lot of them are still sending their folks to Choices or to True Love Is. I think that's the thing. What's the psychological spiritual impact on conversion programs? You have heard a lot of it in the sharing this evening, and there is evidence, right, from psychologists that it is harmful. So I don't know if someone can Google out the research and post it out into the chat box, but it is proven that it's evidence that this has caused psychological harm, all these conversion programs. Okay. This is a question that I think that might want to invite the speakers to answer. What are some personal encounters or affirmations they've heard from God about your sexual orientation and gender identity? Yeah. Peter, you want to take this?
Okay. Okay, this is controversial. Okay, controversial. So I have I've got a couple of cell group leaders that that receive a lot of words of knowledge from God. Okay, so they know that I'm gay, and they are scratching their heads and wondering how to deal with it. So they shared with me that this is what they heard from God about me. Okay, Genesis 9:13. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be a token or sign of a covenant or solemn pledge between me and the earth. Revelation 4:3. And he who sat there appeared like jasper and sardius, and encircling the throne there was a halo that looked like a rainbow of emerald.
Wow.
So that was cool, right? So that was God affirming me lah, even in their presence lah, which is what God says lah. You know, he will create a banquet for us. He will give us a feasting table in the presence of our enemies lah. This is the promises of God lah.
Wow, that's so nice.
One of the questions popped up is about, we'll talk mainly about sexuality here. What about negotiating being transgender and Christian? One of the things is, I think that's not an area that Choices covered. You know.
Oh, I think they wanted to.
But they don't have the resources to do that.
Rogers was.
My session addressed it actually.
Oh.
The module addressed it. So Choices, the theory is that it's wrong. So I remember that there were examples cited of how people were saved at the very last moment from making hasty decisions and all that. We didn't go very much in depth because it was not, none of us identify as transgender, but I remember distinctly, this was I think in the first or second session, it was very clear, and I think there was a Cy Roger reference also, a short video that they showed on transgenderism, because I think Cy Rogers identified as transgender at the start, something like that.
Yeah, I think I would like to say a few words. I think Cy Rogers, because I also saw in our questions about whether Cy Rogers is an example who changed. So even though he married and had a kid, he still identified as quite femme, and I don't think he ever said he was straight, right? So it's a little bit like Alan Chambers. Alan Chambers doesn't say he's straight, he's still gay. So like Cy Rogers, he's still quite femme. He just passed away from cancer recently. So yeah, I identify as non-binary, actually, a gay non-binary girl. So I think the thing is, if you go on YouTube, Austin Harkey has a bunch of trans and Christian videos, which resonates with me a lot. And the verse that resonates with me for my sexuality is actually that, that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. So that stuck with me all throughout my struggling to reconcile faith and sexuality. But I think the trans and Christian videos and his book Transforming really touch on how so many verses in the Bible talk about it indirectly. So like in Genesis, I think something that really, really struck me in the trans and Christian videos was that if God created, you know, we always think in binaries, like male and female, you know, like black and white, day and night. But actually, if you think about it in the Bible, even though God created day and night, and, you know, like the water from the heaven, what about dawn and dusk? When do you separate the day and the night? Twilight, you know. What about mangroves, you know? How do you differentiate between land and water? What about, you know, like mammals and creatures in the water? Like what about
Dolphins.
right? And also, what was the creature that has eggs? I can't remember. The platypus, yes, platypus. So yeah, it's a mammal that has eggs. So yeah, thanks, Davian. So I think a non-binary girl, I don't really, yeah, it's like, I think in literature, there is like being neither male nor female, but I identify as non-binary, but a bit more to the female side, if that makes sense for Synthis. Yeah, so I hope that helps. Yeah, so I think that's for me.
There is a question about why no representatives from True Love is because, as I started off this evening, it is presenting a Christian perspective that's coming from us. It's not presenting all Christian perspectives. And I think that's why there's no representatives, because that's not what we intend to do. This is not meant to be a debate. This is meant to be speaking our story so that people can listen to understand and not listen to argue. Some of the things that we are actually going to touch on, right? I'm going to, in the next couple of weeks, because it's going to be more biblical, digging around in the Bible, and you'll be surprised how many gender non-conforming people characters there are in the Bible, right? And too often we read it with a certain lens and making a lot of assumptions, right? We do have a lot of questions, but I think that I've scanned through the questions. My church has a don't ask, don't tell attitude towards it. What's your take on that? Pauline, you want to take this one?
Yeah, because I've been in a church who kind of has a don't ask, don't tell attitude, because they recognize that actually even among their pastors and their group of staff, that there is a spectrum of beliefs with regards to the whole LGBTQ issue. And it's probably different in some ways. And so the senior pastor at that time, during a staff meeting, because I was an intern at that time, said, you know what, we are not going to say anything about it. We're not going to make a statement. We're not going to officially say where we stand, because it would not be representative of actually everyone here on this table. And I think that was many years ago, but I think that's kind of the wisest thing he could do at that moment. You know, and so I'm not surprised that you might be in a church where they take this don't ask, don't tell attitude, because they also recognize that there is actually a spectrum of views and perspectives, even among Christians. There isn't only one view or one perspective. You know, the problem is that no one has a monopoly of that view. And they know that whatever view they put up there officially is going to cause ire and upset among different groups of people within the church. So, you know, so that's something that I think some churches have decided to take in some way. So, and the question was, what do you do with that, is it? I don't know about you, but I think it's hard, you know, when you're in an environment like that, in that sense, because it's basically pretending that it's something that is not an issue, and that there's a part of you that you cannot really be open about or to talk about with people that really matter to you, especially in your church community. And I think that's really hard to some extent.
We ran 10 minutes over time. I want to be to observe what we committed to both our panelists and to all of you out there. I think that this is just the beginning, because this is the first time we have done such a talk or conversation, and we have such a overwhelming response from folks. I anticipated maybe 100, but we got 198 signups. And I want to thank you for attending this, for showing interest to begin entering into a conversation and to envision a way forward for everyone. I really, really want to lift up Francesca, Gerald, and Peter for their vulnerability, because it's not easy to share these things. It's not easy to open up yourselves and be vulnerable and to be open to even attack. I've hesitated a long time to do something like that because I don't want to get the three of you doxxed, the three of you attacked by people or cancelled or whatever. And I don't want, this is the fear that I have, because your safety and your well-being is paramount. You are not a tool to an end. We don't want to weaponize your stories and your lives as part of the engagement. And I don't see this, like us versus them, or FCC versus TLI as some like a competition or war or a fight. I think that's the last kind of image that I want to use. We want to engage in a respectful way to offer our stories, but also to call out when harm is done, to call out and name when there's an issue, right? So that we are clear. Because like what Pauline shared just now, both of us are the receiving end of people who have long-term negative effects from all this, right? The self-hate and the self-loathing. And we want to stop it at the source in some way. And we want the LGBTQ community to be well, to be whole, to be restored, right, in the fullness of their being. So everyone lives a full life. And I think that's very, very important. Yeah. So I really want to appreciate Francesca, Gerald, and Peter again. And also our background moderators who are doing all the things in the background to make this run. Thank you, all of you. Yeah. So I hope that we can continue this conversation. We have a link. Do I have the link here? Oh, let me see if I have the link. The follow-up discussion group, you can sign up at bit.ly/FCCQCD. And that will happen on Sunday at 2:30. Yeah, if you're interested. Yeah. I would like to hand the time, to the panelists, if you have any last words to say to folks. First, let's go with Peter first. Peter, any last words to speak to the audience before we close for the night?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to my partner, Harry, who's been with me for 13 years, through hills and valleys. He's been, I mean, there's a billion people on the planet. What does one life, any one life really mean, right? But when you're in a partnership like this, it's all the good things and the bad things, the mundane things, the sublime things. And basically, being in partnership is, your life will not go unnoticed because I will notice it. And your life will not go unwitnessed because I will be your witness.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Harry. Harry is also in the chat as in the. Gerald, what about you? Any last thoughts?
Yeah, I would just strongly encourage everyone, especially those of you who are attending, out of genuine interest, to just think critically. Don't. I remember there's a Bible verse somewhere that Paul said, always think, right? Question, check the scriptures, read things yourself. Don't just believe what people tell you is the case. In fact, this applies to this session as well. So I think critically for yourself. Don't let someone else dictate what your life should be like. Yeah.
Francesca.
Yeah, I would like to thank all my friends at FCC, the ones that have said nice things to me, encouraging words, and all that you have done, and the leaders, and my friends also from elsewhere that I see in this session. Thank you for being here and for being there, I guess, for living out your truth. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one more thing, sorry. I think we really have to thank Miao and Pastor Miao and Pastor Pauline, because they have really been very strong pillars of a lot of LGBT, especially the youth who are lost. So thank you very much for that. I think very often you do a lot of thankless work and want to recognize that.
Pauline, any last words?
I actually feel really privileged to be here, just being able to be a part of your journeys for a little bit, and so thankful for everyone actually who is here with us this evening, even though we can't see your faces, but your presence here means a lot to us. So thank you for sharing in this special space with us this evening, and yeah, be well.
I want to close by saying that the amount of interest to engage in this conversation is very powerful for me personally. It really signals a huge change. The questions that a lot of you asked, how can I be supportive? How can I walk with my LGBTQ friends? How do I know more? That's really love, right? And that's really, that opens up the opportunity for transformation and for all people. So I hope to see you all in the next few Fridays, 3 more Fridays conversations. And those of you who don't attend FCC, give it a plug. You can join us on Sundays at 10:30 for our live streaming service. But really, thank you for joining us on today for 2 whole hours, more than 2 hours. Yeah, thank you and have a good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Cheryl and Francesca, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
You three are all
Oh, thank you.
amazing, truly. Yeah, it's just amazing listening to your hearts behind your words and your lives, and yeah, that's been just an amazing journey. Thank you.
And thanks for sharing, Peter and Gerald. I never really talked to the guys because we were all separated.
But I think one thing that struck me during the conversation just now is that we're the lucky ones, I guess, who
Yes, I
are
know.
more put together to be able to share.
Yeah.
I think for every one of us, there are like 10 people who have been totally broken by conversion therapy. It's very sad. Like for my batch, a lot of them are, I mean, even those that are in relationships, I don't even think they have gotten their life sorted out. They're still very confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a concept in the Bible of the remnant, right? Zephaniah 3:19 says, "Behold, at that time I will deal with all those who afflict you. I will save the limping ones and gather the outcasts, and I will make them a praise and a name in every land of their shame." So I think we are the remnant.
Okay.
Actually, it sounds to me like the remnant are everyone, all those people who can't speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we represent the remnant now. Gerald and Francesca, you guys are so amazing. Love you guys so much.
You too.
Me too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pastor Miak. Thanks, Pastor Pauline.
No,
Thank you, everyone. And make a move first.
Yeah. Have a good night.
Good night. See ya.
Good night.
Sean, can you pass me back the host so that I can stop the recording?
Okay. You are the host, right? No, right?
I don't.
Sorry.
Only the host can start and stop, I think.
Okay, I make you the host now. Presentation, ah?
Oh, can.
Shan asked which church is Peter attending.
I already replied privately.
Reply already. Okay.